Welcome back, fantasy managers. This is Tom, or Devo 1099, coming to you from Brooklyn with fantasy football backers. Game week 3 coming up. Unfortunately, our friend Big O1 is on holiday, and Martin Cow 77 or Everton Matrix, depending on if you follow him on Twitter or if you saw his article on our site, is a new contributor to backers. We're very excited. If you happen to read his preview article, he went really in depth with a lot of different statistics, really evaluating what's going on right now, rather than just looking at the quality of certain players. We're looking at how they're working into the teams so far in the early going. Surely there's a lot of noise in those statistics in just a 2-game sample, but I think that the trends that he's targeting are spot on, and we're very excited to have him doing that going forward and helping out the team. And he's going to definitely be doing some podcasts with me. I think you'll enjoy our banter. He's an Englishman, a diehard Everton supporter, and an all-around good guy. So happy to have Martin on board. He's a little under the weather today, so just me. We're going to go through the games relatively quickly. Touching on Mondogoal, they're growing at an incredible rate, and we couldn't be more excited to be along for the ride. They have great people working for them. They have a great team. Certainly some struggles with with the lineups page, with the scoring not working live, which is frustrating. It is. You want to be able to track your teams and know exactly how you're doing and know what you're hoping happens in different games, and to not have that up to speed is a bit of a challenge. But they want it to happen as much as we do, so there's no point in hand wringing and worrying too much about it. I'm probably a bit concerned that it's going to happen again this week. To be fair, they're still growing. The 5,500 person contest is it's not going to fill. So they lowered the number of entries that you can have from 100 to 50. So some of the more high volume players, I put 100 in the first week. I think I had 60 some odd last week. So I think that helps, casual players, and frankly, I don't need to be making 50 teams. I was just entering, 10 to 15 teams and then multiplying it up. So it's no skin off of our back either. So hopefully they can get more, fill that towards the 5,500. That's always a conflict that we see in the States, is between getting these larger prize pools and allowing the multi-entry for some of the bigger players. And I think finding the right mix is really ideal, where, somebody can go and put £2 in this contest and have a chance to come away with a win. And I think that can happen. And, we'll see how that goes going forward. This week should be good as well, and so we have to be happy that Mondogoal is willing to do this and taking a lot of risk to get a lot more play from us, and I commend them for that. Clearly we want to be a little bit realistic about where they are and want them to improve their product as quickly as possible. And that's the next point of news I want to get to. Is this week DraftKings was granted their gaming license in the UK, which is a pretty significant move. Nick, Big O1, had actually been tracking this for a while, and he was, I think, the person who essentially broke it on Twitter when he saw that they had applied several months ago, and then followed that up by seeing that they had been granted. DraftKings then did do a press release and discuss their plans a bit more, hiring Poker Tatsu, his Twitter feed, as the head of that office there. So DraftKings, we're expecting them in late Q4 this year, which is right around the corner and pretty exciting. DraftKings is a great product here in the U.S. They have fantastic tech. They're actual, Premier League product in terms of the scoring. They only use 8 players. It's different. I don't necessarily know that it's better or worse. I think I prefer Mondogoal, and I will definitely be playing on both if they come out and do a similar thing. And that's the other question, is whether they split up UK players and US players. Right now, that seems to be the indication that there'll be a separate website altogether for UK players, which I think is probably a good thing, at least in the early going. Later on, because football is not as big in the States and not as big of a daily fantasy sport right now, it's going to be imperative that we combine the pools and everybody has a shot. But it's nothing but exciting. It'll expose a lot of UK players to DraftKings, and cricket could be on the way, rugby could be on the way. This is really an interesting time in daily fantasy. This is the boom that we were expecting. We didn't know when it would happen. It seems to be that it's on its way. So as for now, though, we're going to stick with Mondogoal and go through the slate quickly here. The big contest starts with the 3 p.m. games tomorrow, but if you do decide to play the earlier game because you want to play some Manchester United players, I don't blame you. The big question will be, and we'll have those lineups, is is De Gea actually staying? That was sort of the rumor today. Seems plausible, certainly, with Real Madrid offering to basically pay him to play out his contract with United and then come there next year. Romero, as I've touched on, I don't believe is a particularly strong keeper, but their defense has been good enough that it doesn't matter. This is the Morgan Schneiderlin effect that you saw last year. If you really tracked it, and I did at one point because I was curious, Schneiderlin makes a significant impact, and there certainly could be some noise in this, but for Southampton, hit the goals against while he was on the pitch was something like 0.9 a game, and when he was off was something like 1.3. That's pretty significant. And then you see, the first 2 matches for United, they've got clean sheets. Maybe it's not him, but if you watch him play, his work rate is excellent. He's gonna stop attacks from even forming, and he's pretty tenacious out there. So Romero is expensive on Mondogoal, 9.9. De Gea is a nice price of 7.4. If you're playing, you're gonna want to hope De Gea is in there. United certainly are one of the favorites for a clean sheet this week. So you can look at Darmian, 9.1. You can look at Shaw, I think is a lot more interesting at 7.3. And when you get to the attack, I think that's when it really, it really behooves you to try to guess right. So in the Champions League qualifier, we saw Memphis score 2 really phenomenal goals and then tack on an assist later. Now, this was Club Brugge, a Belgian team that's not particularly talented, maybe down in terms of quality, more like an Eredivisie team that Memphis came from, and we know he can dominate them. That's already well established. For me, to see him do it for United is still a step forward. It still shows that he can be a focal point of the attack for a Premier League team, even if it's against a team that they should beat up pretty easily and did handle well after the own goal that started it. But he's still expensive. He's still based on his Eredivisie price. He's 14.4 million. But against Newcastle, how much better is Newcastle than Club Brugge? I think you have to consider Memphis. If you're playing the early games, you probably want to watch that match, and you probably will take Memphis, and there's nothing I can really do about that. But I'm not going to tell you that's a bad idea. I think he can score on them. He showed that he has tremendous quality. He's interesting. So he's a little expensive. Then you've got Rooney, who's done absolutely nothing in 2 games. Didn't really do much in the Champions League qualifier midweek, but is down to 8.2 million and, is somewhere around 50-50 to score. So, maybe the odds makers are slow to recognize that he's struggling. It's not like, it's not like he's getting shots and not scoring. It's not like he's getting a ton of touches and not scoring. It's just Van Gaal's attack is just neutering them. It took them going down 1-0 to Bruges to really even turn it up. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I think there are enough other options to avoid Rooney and the question marks that are surrounding him. But if you are in, the early matches and you have some upside leagues, like, you could play Rooney, absolutely. I think that, the risk has been mostly taken out by his price being down at 8.2 million. He could get you 2 points. We know that, but he could also score a goal, goal and assists. He's got the upside that Memphis also has, but at nearly, just over half the price. So I'm not ready to give up on Rooney yet. I don't think that his skills have fallen off a cliff to the point that, he won't be a viable option the entire season all of a sudden. I don't think that's the case. I don't love United's attack because I don't think Van Gaal really cares much about scoring goals. I think he cares about playing really solid, organized defense, and that's what they've been doing. So if they went up 1-0 on Newcastle, I don't know that they're going to be pressing for, a second and third as much as you'd hope. I mean, I think, if I'm correct, they had 3 shots on goal in 2 Premier League games. So overrating what happened in Belgium is probably, that was at Old Trafford. Probably a poor decision to really focus too much. But if you're playing the early games, it's probably because you want players in this game. And if you do want players in this game, those are certainly reasonable options. Moving on. Palace is hosting Villa. Palace, ran into Arsenal last match, which is not going to be good for most teams. Just because Arsenal is going to dominate possession. Whether they do anything with it, remains to be seen. But they do dominate possession, and Palace didn't have a ton of attacking statistics. Joel Ward did score, so that's somebody you can look at. I know that he was relatively popular over on DraftKings. And I think I saw him. He's around 7.4 million now. Suarez is 6.5 million, and then the most interesting Palace player in terms of defense is going to be McCarthy, assuming he draws a start again in net. He's a mere 5.7 million, and has one of the best chances of a clean sheet among all teams this week. Playing at home, this is a pretty good opportunity. Now, do I totally trust Palace? No. At 5.7 million, does that really matter? Also, probably no. You've got a legitimate chance at a clean sheet under 7 or 8 million. A clean sheet is essentially worth 7.8 when you add the 90 minutes, and that's with no saves. So 7.8 potential for 5.7 million is pretty much a no-brainer. I definitely will have shares of McCarthy. So will everyone else. This is not going to be a surprise. The rest of Palace is also very interesting because they seem to be very underpriced. This could be due to them being Palace. It could be due to not performing particularly well against Arsenal and the Mondogoal algorithm lowering their price. But Cabaye is 5.3 million, which for a player that was purchased by PSG just last year and played exceptionally well when he got a chance, and is just a high quality player that we're seeing as a trend in the Premier League, is that these mid-table teams are able to purchase these high-end players now that maybe aren't getting full pitch time for some of the top teams in the world, which is not as damning as it should be. But Cabaye's been very good already. 5.3 million in a match where they should have a lot of possession. He should have passes. He should get some shots. He may get some assists. Like, this is, he's one of the first players I'll be plugging in. I know Martin also recommended him and has been very high on him. He seems like among the midfielders for Palace, he's going to be the most reliable to get minutes. You've got Bolasie, you've got Zaha, you've got Punchin, who are also all great options. Punchin's 8 million, Zaha 6.3, Bolasie is down at 5.8. You wonder if he's a little bit in the doghouse with Pardew, just because he hasn't been getting a whole lot of pitch time. But all of those guys are talented. So you can look at those lineups. If you're playing the big contest, look at those lineups. A Palace stack is not out of the realm of possibility. And then we get up top now, Connor Wickham, who it's sort of just mind-boggling that that he would be sold in the first place to a pretty similar team in the Premier League at his age, and just kind of given up on. It's a little shocking, but it's not surprising considering how poorly run that club is. Wickham's only 4.3, and the discussion this week is that Glenn Murray may get sold. I believe it's Watford is the one poking around. If that's not a vote of confidence that Pardew likes Wickham, then I don't know what is, because it's not like Bamford, who they also bought, who certainly has potential, is getting a ton of time. Like, he hasn't really been out there. So if they're willing to sell Murray, who was, very efficient for them and pretty darn good the last year, and also in his previous, run with them, that has to mean that Pardew likes Wickham. It has to. Or maybe he's seeing a ton of Bamford in practice and he's comfortable with both of them. But it seems to me that it has to be Wickham, because Bamford hasn't established himself in the Premier League. So how can they possibly give up Murray and just assume that Wickham can handle it solo and Bamford can cover for him? So that's my guess. That makes me a lot more interested in Wickham, especially against Villa, and especially at 4.3 million is a steal. So we'll be looking long and hard at that. Going through Villa very quickly, we're not taking anybody from there. They're not in a good position here. We want them at home, if ever. But one guy to keep an eye on is Jordan Amavi. He's looked very good at fullback, and somebody to keep an eye on. But he's already up to 7.2 million because he had some good numbers in France. So it'll be a while. We're going to need him to come back down before we really get excited about that. A match that could be one of the higher scoring matches of the week, Leicester hosting Tottenham at King Power. Mahrez has been incredible. He has to be on your radar, 9.2 million. Okazaki, 8.6. Vardy, 6.1. Albrighton, 7.3. What are we going to see from the Spurs? They have been two completely different teams in their first two matches. They were two completely different teams in their last match alone. They absolutely dominated Stoke for about 60 minutes. Take Kane off. Not that Kane was, necessarily their driving force that was, helping them play well, but take Kane off and just imploded. Just absolutely imploded. They looked terrible, and they let Stoke get right back in it. get the draw, and it was shocking. Can you turn back to Kane at 10 million, Eriksen at 10 million? Will Danny Rose finally get back into the 11 at 9.1? I was down on Kane preseason. I know last week I recommended him because I didn't know, it was just too easy of a game for him. He should have played well. Instead, he plays 60 minutes, comes off, gets 3 points, and sinks a lot of teams. Can you go back to him this week and say, all right, bookmakers are backing him again to score right around 50% odds. I'm going to plug him right back in and hope he's good. Well, Pochettino said he wasn't fit. He was running around the States. They played in the MLS All-Star game against the MLS All-Stars. Scored a goal on that, but he was also just hanging around in New York. If you look at his Instagram feed, he was just hopping around the States for a while, and then came up lame with what they're saying was a calf strain, and was a preventative measure to pull him off, thinking it was 2-0 and they were going to be fine, but didn't really work out. Can you roll Kane back out there? I think you can. I think he is a skilled player. He's still only 10 million. He's not, the 14 that he got up to last year. His conversion rate was too high. That's going to come down. But some of that's already factored in, and that's why he's already a lower price. So, away from home, and am I going to end up on Kane very often? Probably not. But I will have him because he still has the upside to score a goal or two, get an assist. I think it's going to be a high-scoring match. This could be 3-3 pretty easily. So Eriksen's also in play. Rose, if he starts, you'll want to look at. Moving on, we've got another really intriguing match, Norwich hosting Stoke. Norwich has found some fantasy surprises. Houlihan I had last week on a couple teams, pair of assists, but he's up to 9.7 million. That gives me a little bit of pause. Stoke is not a terrible defensive side by any means. Redmond started this time after coming off the bench in the first match and scored again. Certainly will be popular, 7.2 million. Whitaker scored from center back last game. From defense last game, 6.5 million. Jerome's still 3.5, but not really doing a whole lot to justify. But if you think that they can score on Stoke, I think Jerome's a pretty good pick if you want to spend the money in the midfield or in your defense that you need to go that cheap up top. And if you do, you probably want to play Wickham anyways. Stoke is going to be tough. We're going to see their lineup, which is going to be very helpful. But they're going to start. They've made these purchases. They've got Bojan back. He played 90 minutes last week for their second team. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to set up and how they're going to incorporate it. But like Arnautovic is pretty much buried on the bench. He's played about 90 minutes in 2 matches. He's a nice player, but I don't see how he can work into the side. You've got Afellay. You've got Shaqiri now at 10.8 million. Ben Dinnery, our injury expert, expects him to play. The sense I'm getting is that he'll draw the start and, play an hour or so. At 10.8 million, is that enough away in, for a side that he hasn't been involved in? I don't think it's a particularly great spot at his price. I will use him because I think that he's, one of the better fantasy players, and, he's gotten out of Bayern and is playing for a team where he can be the absolute focal point and will be. And, he takes shots, he crosses, he's a quick player. He's going to get dribbles. He's going to find space and he's going to find his teammates and he's going to be a great player for us all year. Whether we use him in the first match, I'm probably a little reluctant to do that, particularly when I can get Diouf for $5 million less at forward at 5.8. He can have the benefit of having Bojan, of having Shaqiri, of having Aflac giving him service. He had 5 shots on goal last game and a goal, so he's going to be on everyone's radar. But I think he's a phenomenal pick, and I'm coming around on him big time and can see using him this week. Bojan I will be avoiding. I'm a huge Bojan supporter overall. I am not a big supporter of somebody coming off of major knee surgery in less than a year. It's so hard to do, and it's not like this is a sport like baseball or something where maybe you can get away with not putting weight on your knee or not needing the explosiveness. Not an option in football, and we'll see that. But we'll see how he does. I think that Stoke are a fairly smart club that if he wasn't fit, they wouldn't be sending him out there, particularly when they have other options. So let's see how they handle it before we really, run away from Bojan too much. But I can't see him getting, 90 minutes by any means in the early going. Next match is Sunderland hosting Swansea. This is really going to be an intriguing match because it can go a few different ways. Sunderland has looked dreadful, and I am not someone who thinks Sunderland has a particular amount of quality. I think they are probably going down. I don't like the vast majority of their team. I don't like how they play. I think that Swansea's probably in a good position. However, I also think that Swansea is getting the benefit right now. They played well last year, and they were a bit of a surprise. They also have played against 10 men the first 2 weeks. They were managed to draw Chelsea, and they look good doing it, but I'm not going to argue against that. They also, got that red card and got the goal that allowed them to get the draw and then played a man up the rest of the way. Then last week, they Yama got 2 yellows, gets sent off, and Swansea has, I think, basically an entire half to play a man up. Teams in the Premier League are going to be a little bit better if they have an entire, half with a man up. It's just not, it's not something we can draw as much as we like out of it. So I think that people are overrating that a bit, and you're going to see a lot more Swansea than justifiably will have, or just what they justifiably should have. I could be wrong about this. Swansea could easily win this match 3-0. So we'll see what happens. I will probably have less Swansea than most. I will definitely not totally avoid Swansea because I think they are good. I think that it's just one of those things where it's sort of a perfect storm where Sunderland has looked absolutely dreadful. Swansea has looked very good, part of which has been because they have had a man advantage for, I think, nearly half the minutes that they've played in 2 matches. So I think they're going to be a little bit overrated. I'm probably going to have less of them than everybody else. That said, Sigurdsson, Gomes, Shelvey is a guy who Martin and I have been talking about. I pointed out that his underlying numbers really support that, that this is potentially sustainable. The unsustainable part about Shelvey is he's Shelvey, and he's a head case, and he can turn into a pumpkin at any point. I don't know if you guys use that term in England. Sorry, but he may not be able to hold this up, and the second you rely on Shelvey, I think is the second that your team is sunk. That said, the numbers are just too good right now to totally avoid, and I think you have to consider the bald wonder for your teams. Also, Fabianski is a great keeper. He is 8.4 million, worth considering as well. Next match, West Ham hosting Bournemouth. I am not a West Ham backer. I think they were a little bit fortunate against Arsenal in the first week. People overreacted to that first match. People want to think West Ham is good. Adrian is a decent keeper, but now he's not playing. So now we're looking at Randolph as their backup. Bournemouth, on the other hand, I've actually, I think they deserved a better result at Anfield on Monday. I like a few players on their team. I like Richie. I like Francis. I think Wilson will start to notch here relatively soon. The odds do not say to take Bournemouth here. The odds say to take West Ham. I think most of that is Payet has been incredible. We've been pegging him from the beginning. So far, so good through 2 matches. Sacco, I think, he's had a lot of opportunities. I think he's, bound to punch one in. This still has a feel of me to like a 2-2 type match. I'm not entirely sure what Martin predicted himself. We're gonna disagree from time to time, but I like Bournemouth. I don't particularly like West Ham, but West Ham's at home. I can see using Randolph, Jenkinson, Cresswell. The plus with Jenkinson, Cresswell, and we did this all last year too, is they can attack as well. So if the clean sheet doesn't come through, if even the single goal allowed doesn't come through, they can still score points for you. Payet is, was fantastic. He's expensive. Sacco is much cheaper. So I'm probably not going to end up with a ton of West Ham. I just don't think that for me that's a type of direction I plan on going. That doesn't mean it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's wrong for you to do it. I may be wrong, but I probably will be more inclined to look at Bournemouth. One player I want to point out is Andrew Sermon. He is a midfielder, and this is sort of a Mondogoal special. He is 5.8 million. He has 146 passes completed in the first 2 games. He had around 100 in the first game where Bournemouth dominated possession against Villa. I think they have a good chance of, getting 55% of possession against West Ham. I think they're a better team than West Ham. I think that the only reason that I'm not as confident saying that is because it is being played at Upton Park. But I think Sermon, he should be able to get you 6 points for 5.8 million, and that's if he doesn't score or get an assist. That's just 1.8 for 90 minutes, and counting on 70, 80 passes. Somebody to keep in mind. We want to get about 100 points. Realistically, we're going to probably need. Last week I think it was in the 120s. But, if you can get for 5.8, you can get 6, 7, 8 points pretty confidently. That's not the worst move in the world. And his floor is very high. So that's a guy to keep in mind. Not exciting, but somebody who could really help you out. And, if you can get the goal scores with your other spots, he can make sure that you don't take a 2, 3, 4 point turnout in one of your spots there. All right. Next, we are going to move to West Brom. So I think this is now Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. West Brom hosting Chelsea. Chelsea clearly in their first 2 matches has not played as the Chelsea we'd expect. Not only have they played poorly, all the stats, they pile on and justify that they have just been a poor side. If you expect that to happen again, in game week 3 after all this hand wringing. I don't know. I don't think West Brom's a team to expose them. If you do think it's going to happen, you've got Berahino at a very reasonable 6.6. You've got Salomon Rondon, who has Champions League experience. Got a run out last game. Hasn't been particularly effective yet, but at 5.1 million, he has a type of quality that I think you're going to find him more in the 10, 11, 12 range by the end of the season. So at 5.1, you're getting a great player. Not the best matchup. I don't think that this is necessarily the spot. I think I would rather him continue to struggle a little bit. And then next time West Brom is at home against a lesser side, then you strike on Rondon. But if you wanted to use him on a team and you think that he can justify 5.1, I don't think that's crazy. Make sure he's you won't be able to make sure he's starting. So in that sense, then maybe it is crazy. So yeah, I wouldn't touch Rondon. But if you want to punt, it's your money. Give it a shot. Chelsea, on the other hand, all of their prices are still inflated from last season. So you're still having to pay 15.7 million for Hazard, and he has a 5 and 6 point game so far. Fouls are worth less, which was really his calling card. That said, he's Hazard. He can always score. He's on penalty duty. If you have the money, I think Hazard is still going to be a good player. They should dominate possession against West Brom. So I'll certainly be looking to him in the midfield. Fabregas has been bad. I'm not touching him. He's playing too far back. He's a deep line playmaker that relies on assists. And if he's, if they're not scoring goals, which they could get 2 or 3 against West Brom in a nice, recovery match, but I'm probably not touching Fabregas. Costa's a 9.2. The only defender I would probably be realistically willing to play is Billy Queta at 8.4. There is discussion that Zuma is going to start. I don't know if that would be for Terry or Cahill. Mourinho is trying to make a statement, I think, by subbing off Terry last match while Cahill had a pretty bad bloody nose. It seemed like that would have made more sense to take him off. They also have Rahman now to potentially replace Ivanovic, who has looked just terrible. He can't cover anyone right now down the left side. So we could see Rahman starting, but I don't think you can risk that. Mourinho typically has been pretty loyal to his team. I don't know if he's panicking quite as much as everyone in the media, though, he brings a lot of the media attention on himself, clearly. So I don't know if I'd be willing to start Rahman. He is not in the Mondogoal game anyways, so that makes that decision easy. But, can you start Zuma confidently? Maybe. Even so, it's probably a situation I'm going to avoid for the most part. Courtois is back, 8.1 million. I like that. And I like Azpilicueta, but the rest of it I'm probably going to leave alone. Next match, we have Everton and Manchester City at Goodison Park. Lukaku has looked amazing. Kone has looked fantastic. Barkley has looked like the player that we've always hoped he would be. I know that I have not always been very complimentary of him. I still am not convinced that this is something he can do consistently because he never has before. We knew he could flash this type of talent, and he has. But he's up to 9.4 million, so you're not getting a whole much of a break on him. Lukaku 10.3. Kone is the guy at 6.4 is interesting, but for me, I do think Everton can score on City. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know that they are particularly good plays, even at home, just because City has looked so dominant in their first 2 matches. You've got Silva and Aguero both at 14.3. You've got Yaya at 13.7. You've got Sterling at 10. You got Kolarov 9.6, Hart 9.2, Company at 6. Company scored 2 matches in a row, which is clearly not going to continue to happen. But he's still underpriced at $6 million. He was injured last year, and he was not very good last year, and that kept his price down. He's someone who will foul, so he even got a yellow card last week, but managed to score a goal, so that more than negated it. But I like City. I probably don't want to pay their inflated prices off of 2 really, really strong weeks now, going away from home to a side that I think is pretty decent. Everton is, as long as they don't fall apart like they did at the beginning of last season and have too big a hole to dig out of, they're an upper mid-table team that could have a 5th, 6th, 7th place, 8th place finish. So when we have that type of team playing at home, coming off a really nice performance against Southampton, do you really want to pay market rates for Aguero and the likes? Yeah, on a couple teams, sure, but on my cash team, am I going to pay $14 million for Aguero? Probably not. 2 games to go here. We've got the other Sunday afternoon game, Watford and Southampton. I think Watford's been a little unfortunate not to get a result so far. Southampton has been bad. They drew against, and I'm not sure how to say this, the Danish champions. I think it's Midtjylland, who are also owned by the Brentford owners, and a really interesting club if you want to follow them at all. All based on advanced stats. They do a ton with set pieces. They have a set piece coach. They've got all these training regimens, and they're really looking at numbers and trying to do advanced statistical analysis that maybe we don't see in football as much, and having some success. Granted, it's for the Danish league, but they did have a chance and to qualify for champions. So anyhow, keep them on your radar. Interesting team to follow if you like numbers and that sort of thing. Anyhow, Watford, Gomez in goal, 7.5 million. Nyom is 6.6. He's had 6 points each match, so I think that's a pretty safe play. Cathcart also has been very popular. He's at 5 million, playing center back. And then you've got Deeney, who's 5.7. The discussions that they may try to purchase Murray are pretty damning for his chances this season, but the numbers suggest that he'll be able to score. So we'll see what happens. I don't know what to do with Southampton. Mane is 11.1 million, so I'm pretty comfortable leaving him alone. Pella, on the other hand, is 6.1 million, and he is that siren that we can't turn away from here at Fantasy Football Backers, or at least me personally. He's just too inexpensive, and he has too many opportunities to score. We've seen him do it for the Italian national team. We've seen him do it in Europa qualifying this summer. It's bizarre that he can continue to be this low. And then Stecklenburg is 3.5 million. So he's in that same position that we've seen him in before, where in a match where he has a chance to get a clean sheet and he's 3.5 million, he could get you 8, 9, 10 points for nothing. But he can also go negative. So another tough position, I think, for upside leagues. It's something you consider. For cash teams, I think you probably want somebody with a higher likelihood of a clean sheet. Jay Rodriguez took a penalty during the Europa match. Tadic was not on the field at the time, but that is something that I mentioned on Twitter and something to keep an eye on. If he's a penalty taker and he's going to be playing 75, 80 minutes, J-Rod can score. So, he's definitely on my radar. He's still a little expensive based on his last season, the way Mondogoal does pricing. So I'm going to probably hold off on J-Rod for a little while. But if he's on penalty duty, definitely want to keep an eye on, and as he gets back and fit from his knee injury. The last match, Monday night, Arsenal hosting Liverpool. Arsenal, besides the disappointment against West Ham, they dominated that match outside of the scoreline, which is not going to be much solace to Gunners supporters, but there's no real drama to be concerned with. If you look at, and I know Martin mentioned this in his midweek column, if you look at the number of touches in the midfield that some of their players are getting, Cazorla, Ramsey, Ozil, and Alexis, now that he's back, I mean, they're getting an incredible amount of touches in the right areas, in the final third, in the penalty box, making a ton of passes. Cazorla is tied with Sermon for the lead among midfielders in completed passes. All those guys are viable options. Against Liverpool, are they the right options? Cazorla is up at 14.5. The rest are over 10. I think Sanchez at 10.1 is probably someone you're going to want to consider long and hard. Giroud at 8.8, and then Petr Cech at 7.8 is somebody that, if you think that Arsenal can keep Liverpool from taking particularly efficient shots, I think Cech could be a nice steal, because I think Liverpool will get a few shots. How good they are is a question. Arsenal tend to get beat by counterattacking sides that have speed and can catch them off guard. Benteke is not a counterattacker. Coutinho is not really a counterattacker. Sure, he's fast, but I don't see him, dribbling the length of the pitch and scoring. So Liverpool might be a really bad matchup, or they may be in a bad matchup heading to the Emirates. That it may be reasonable to take more Arsenal players than I'm letting on, and I'm kind of talking through this as I speak. But I think that there aren't a ton of sides that I trust. I mentioned Swansea's away, and I'm not entirely convinced about them. Palace, you're never going to really want to be risking too much money on. City, may have a tricky match at Goodison Park. If you're not playing the early match, you can't use United. All of a sudden, Arsenal kind of moves up the area there. So at Ramsey's price, I think that he might be a guy I'd use. I think Alexis is another one I'd use. As for Liverpool, I don't think, sure, West Ham did fine, and Payet was great in that match at the Emirates, but generally I don't think that's a position I want to be in, particularly on a Monday night when you're not entirely sure who's going to start. Sure, I mean, Benteke will start. Coutinho will start. Henderson may or may not be fit. Firmino may work himself into the side. I'm not going to bother with any of those players. I'm not taking Klein. I'm not taking Mignolet. So that's where I'm at with it. I've rambled a bit. I didn't have anybody to talk to, but I hope that you've learned a little bit here, that you've got your team's ready to go. We're kicking off with United here pretty shortly. So best of luck to you. Play on Mondogoal. Let's continue to try to fill those big contests and give them the inspiration to keep doing it, and wish them the best of luck and having everything run smoothly this week. And come next week, I should have somebody along with me again. Thanks for watching, Fantasy Football Backers. See you next week.